Hey everybody, welcome back for another Ice Cave Radio. Doa here along with Charmer as always, and we have so many Set 4 spoilers to get through. There was a Fantasy Flight gameplay stream earlier today, and they just dropped like a dozen of them, if not more. It was a ton. I was just scrolling through. I was like, wait, what? We got this much? So we've got a ton of spoilers to look at. So we're going to try to move through everything else fairly quickly here. Before we do that, any recent fun events, anything going on in your Star Wars life, Charmer?
No, I mean, I talked about this on the other podcast that I do for Flesh and Blood, but Stark has been sick. He had a really bad case of the flu. He had the fever for like 6 days. He was out of commission for almost 9 days. We did the math. I got sick. Monroe was sick. So I haven't done anything really gaming related.
We're glad you're back.
So that's the short answer. No, I haven't done anything fun.
All right. Well, here, now we can do something fun right now. We got a lot of Set 4 spoilers to look at. I'm excited because as you're watching this, I guess this will be posted on a Saturday or Friday for our Patreons, our Patreon patrons. Anyway, our patrons. I'll just say it that way. I'll be at an event called Multicon here in LA. That's a charity event for wildfire relief, and we're gonna have a lot of cool people there. But also, Xander and Serena from Fantasy Flight are going to be around too, and we're going to be playing some Star Wars Unlimited here in the venue. Hopefully there will be a lot of people that we can show the game to and hang out with, and that'll be a great time. So as you're watching this, I will be swooping it up at that event, so that'll be fun. I'm excited in advance for that. But aside from that, then the day after is actually my store showdown, and I'm committed to Wat Tambor. You know, hell or high water. I'm going to try my best to make it work. We'll see how it goes. I have no idea. I might surprise a lot of people and make a pretty deep run. It's possible. It's possible. I would wager I'm one of the better Wat Tambor players in North America, if I had to say, out of like at least 2, maybe 3 Wat Tambor players. But I'm also anticipating running into a bunch of Idens or something and all the bad matchups and just getting wrecked, right? Because I'm not meta. But you know, at the end of the day, you got to do what your heart tells you, and my heart is telling me to join the Techno Union, and so that's what I'm doing. There you go. It
sounds like a fun plan regardless of outcome, and honestly, what else can you ask for?
Yeah, you know, I mean, like I played pretty seriously in Set 1, Set 2, and I'm like, you know, Set 3, I just want to play this silly deck. I'm gonna go for it and see what happens, and if I do well, that's just a better story, right? So it'll be a good time. Anyway, speaking of good times, we had a fun cave poll this week. Let's check it out.
Yes.
Here's the results for this one. I like this one. You're just an average person on Tatooine. What's your mundane job? You know, we talk about Jedis and ship battles and all this really awesome stuff, but we forget about the regular people that make the universe tick. And so I presented 9 options. Obviously, you could just go infinitely deep with this, but these are just the first 9 ones that came to mind. Mechanic, wandering trader, moisture farmer, cantina musician, pod race track concessions worker, bartender, guard at Jabba's palace, and frontier doctor. I tried to draw from Star Wars media to make this list, but I want to ask you, Charmer, what did you choose for this one?
So this is really interesting because based on the text descriptions alone, I would have picked one thing, but because of the images attached, I picked something else. I voted for Wandering Trader.
Okay,
which
like it.
Was like based on text would have been my second choice. My first choice would have been Frontier Doctor.
Nice.
However, I just have a thing for Jawas, man. Like I really do. And so once I saw the Jawas, I was like, I'm voting for the Jawas. But my reasoning behind the 2 choices in general, right, the ones that I was kind of ruminating on, is simple. Which ones am I the least likely to run into trouble doing? So I figure a mechanic, you're likely to see people of all walks of life, but unfortunately that includes people that are like, fix my ship or I'll shoot you.
Sure.
Moisture farmer, like the plus side, free water. Well, not free water, but you get access to a very important, resource. But the downside is you have access to a very important resource, so sometimes people might come hold you up. Cantina musician, that has not always historically went well for a lot of cantina musicians. Pod race track concessions, I think would be fine, but again, like that crowd could get kind of rowdy, and I also don't think that they have very many safety regulations, so you might get sideswiped. Bartender just feels like you're asking for a fight. guard at Jabba's palace. I've seen the people who go there, and I don't want to be the one who has to keep them in line.
Yeah.
So I figured, like, wandering trader, at least you're not in the same spot all the time, so it's harder for ne'er dwellers to track you down. And frontier doctor, if they are messing with you, they're not 100%. So that was my reasoning.
Okay. I will point your attention to the slaughtered Jawas in Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. As far as like dangers to the profession goes, so no one is really safe in Star Wars.
Nobody's safe.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it's a fun one. I picked pod race track concessions worker because I just want to be close to the pod racing, man. I love pod racing, and you're walking around, you're in the bright sunny weather, watching the pod races race, watching the pods fly by. And you're handing out concessions. Everybody loves to see you because you're carrying delicious things. And yeah, it just sounds like a great job. It sounds like a wonderful way to spend the day, And then, after the pod races are done, you have backstage access basically. So if you're a big fan of like Doug Bolt or something, you can go say hi. Maybe you can even get like a picture in front of his pod with him or something. If he's not dead. I don't remember if he dies in episode 1 or not.
I've also seen some of the things that like Sebulba eats, for example, and I don't want to have to handle that, right, as part of my job.
Oh, I don't know. Everyone eats a bunch of different things. It's just how it is. Expand your horizons, Charmer. I'm surprised not as many people chose Frontier Doctor, especially because Thundercat was the Frontier Doctor. And I know it was Book of Boba Fett. It wasn't everybody's favorite show, but Thundercat should be everybody's favorite bass player because he's awesome. So seeing him in the show was pretty fun. I don't know how in the world he got in there, but it was fun. It was fun seeing him in there. I thought Bartender might be kind of fun too, just because you get to chat with a bunch of exciting people. Famous Star Wars bartender B. Arthur, would be fun to hang out with. If you had the bar near hers, you're like, hey, you were great in the Golden Girls. Welcome to Tatooine. That's a deep cut. That's even before like my time. But I'm aware of it. Anyway, that's the...
it can't be before your time.
It is. Golden Girls was started before me. Yeah, of course.
It started, but I'm just saying, like, it was still going. I remember watching Golden Girls reruns.
Maybe in, like, reruns.
At my grandma's house in the mornings.
Right. Yeah. But it wasn't, like, new when I was alive, We knew who B. Arthur was, though, right? Anyway,
for sure.
Back to the poll. You can Google it or whatever, or Bing it. If we ever get a sponsor from Microsoft, we'll gladly say Bing it. Mechanic was the biggest vote here, which I think is cool. You get to mess with ships and speeders and all that sorts of fun stuff. Wandering Trader was second. I agree. The Life of Freedom is appealing. Moisture Farmer, I was surprised, was third because to me that seems like kind of the most grindy, kind of boring one, but maybe it's because I worked on a lot of farms as a kid growing up in Wisconsin, so I kind of like I've lived the farm life to a certain extent, and I want so much more than this provincial life, to quote Belle from Beauty and the Beast. But a lot of people like Moisture, I guess. So what can you do? Musicians up there as well. Only 2 votes for guard at Jabba's palace, so it is a high mortality rate position though.
Yeah. The 2 votes are literally the 2 Gamorreans that listen to our show.
I think so. Yeah, it's the Gamorrean retainers giving each other Sentinel. That's how it works. Yeah. But that was a fun cave poll. Again, join our Discord if you want to participate in fun stuff, or follow us on Twitter too. We post it on Twitter as well. But moving on to spoilers, we have got a ton to go through. Are you ready?
I am, after because you made me Google it. Golden Girls started in 1985, but ran for 7 seasons.
It started in 85?
Started in 85 and ran for 7 seasons. So there was definitely a point in my life I was watching it when it was new, like the new episodes.
I was a little kid, but man.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not older than the Golden Girls, but I guess I am older than the show Golden Girls. The more you know.
Me too.
Wow. There you go. Well, on that note, let's look at some spoilers for this brand new card game in the year of our Lord 2025. Let's start with Admiral Trench, which is a cunning villainy leader. I'll start things off today. And he has the action of exhaust, discard a card that costs 3 or less from your hand if you do draw a card. So interesting little bit of high cost hand filtering to start things off with. And hand filtering, I think, is always good in most card games. Separatist official are the tags in case you're curious. But here's where it gets really interesting, Charmer, all right? action, not epic action, action, pay 3 resources and exhaust. If you control 6 or more resources, deploy this leader. Then on his leader side, he has a 4/5 that says when deployed, reveal the top 4 cards of your deck. An opponent discards 2 of them, draw 1 of the remaining cards, and discard the others. So a little bit of a convoluted way to say you get a card back from your discard. Is it going to be one of the more expensive ones? Are you going to try to stack it so that you're always going to get a good choice? This is a way to get cards back that you maybe played and then lost, either units on the board or events that you had played. But this is such an interesting build around leader, isn't it? I mean, we could spend a whole hour talking about just this leader alone, I think.
Yeah, I like the possibilities of this, and it's an interesting way to give Cunning a grindy game plan, right? Like a Cunning control end game state. I also just wanted to point out, I don't disagree with you about the whole like convoluted way of getting 1 card back, but I legitimately feel like the when deployed here is written in a way where your opponent has the ability to force you to discard your restocks so that you can't like infinite loop stuff back into your deck to keep playing him.
Yeah, maybe.
That's just the feeling I get, because otherwise you would hit game states where you're never going to like deck yourself. Yeah. So if you could just stall forever, you'll always have a threat where they'll run out of resources. And perhaps with new cards, maybe that does become a thing, but I do feel like that was what they were trying to dodge there. But otherwise, yeah, just a really neat hero. Also happy to see that it's in the rare slot, because it's not something that you're going to want to be playing in limited, because part of the ability to redeploy, yes, it's not epic action, but because you have to discard cards when you deploy him, you're going to run out of cards really quick and limited if you start, playing this guy more than once. So,
for sure. Yeah. It is interesting too, because, you can choose if you discard a card or not. I'm sure there's going to be some games where you just can't, do that. Because in limited, especially, you're going to have to discard something that costs 3 or more. There's probably going to be plenty of hands where you just don't have that, That said, I do like the idea of being able to pay 3 for a 4/5. And then when he comes back, you can do it again, right? Right. Because there's no epic action attached to this. You could theoretically do it every turn, right? Because he comes out ready, right? He is a leader. Yes. He deploys ready. So you get a ready 4/5 for 3 resources. That in itself seems strong. Bringing back something seems strong. I like the idea of doing something like discarding an Emperor Palpatine or Darth Vader, and then using Palpatine's return to play that for cheaper, essentially, because you're playing it for 6 from the discard pile. So you can set up some interesting combos with him. And, again, we could go on all day, right? But we have a lot of spoilers to get through. And suffice to say, I think this leader is going to be one that we're going to see a lot of interesting lists built around. And we're definitely going to see people be like trench specialists, because he's just too cool to not, have somebody get, obsessed with him. I'm going to try not to, because this is definitely the leader that could like suck me in for a whole set.
I would love to see an episode by itself for this leader at some point in the future where we talk to a dev about all the different ways that they had to add the caveats. Because I'm also looking at this and thinking like, man, TIE Silencer would have been great with this, but that's probably why it says the 3 or more on the front side, right? Like all of these weird convoluted bits are probably because it was broken at some point during development, and I would love to hear those stories.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like having to reveal the top 40 cards of your deck when deployed, like you said, that is going to burn through your deck pretty quickly, but it is what it is. All right. Yeah. Moving on to another leader here over on the heroism cunning side. Talk about interesting leaders, man. We got some bangers this time around.
Yeah. Kazuda, I'm probably going to slaughter this because I think it's Giono. Yeah.
I've seen the first couple episodes of Resistance. I think it's Giono, but
my biggest problem is I just remember Kazuda. I watched the show with my kids, but I will admit I didn't have full attention. It was definitely like they were watching it and I was with them sort of thing. That being said, I love this leader. So the leader side of the card says, as an action, you can exhaust this leader. A friendly unit loses all abilities for this round. Take an extra action after this one. So in short, you can turn off all of the text on a card that is friendly, and then because that by itself might feel like a weak play on its own, you also get to take another action immediately after. So it allows you to, turn off a bounty on one of your friendly units, for example, and then attack with it. And so that's already itself pretty cool. Has the epic action of if you control 4 or more resources, you can deploy the leader or deploy it as an upgrade. So on the other side, we have either a 2/5 with an on attack of choose any number of friendly units and they lose abilities for this round. Or attached unit as a leader, it gains on attack. Choose any number of friendly units. They lose all abilities for this round. If it's played as an upgrade, it gets +3/+3 as opposed to the 2/5 stat line when deployed on the ground. Now, the main reason that I love this is because there are already, between the last couple sets and things that have been revealed, so many cool things that interact with this leader that I am so excited to start deck building with this. Stolen AT Hauler immediately came to mind. We talked about it on last week's episode.
Today. We're going to see some support that came out.
We're going to see more. I was trying to talk about ones that like we just talked about recently. You know, we saw Stolen AT Hauler and we were like, it feels like there's something else here, right? There's got to be a way that you can make this work, you know, get that payoff. And then it turns out, yeah, there's a whole leader. So you can just get a 4/5 for 3. Cards like Cartel Turncoats, Millennium Falcon from the first set. You can turn off the need to continue to pay for it, for example. There's all sorts of things that already exist on top of, as you said, more things we're going to talk about throughout this episode. So I love this leader.
Yeah, another really interesting build around leader. I just think across the board, the leaders in the set have been really fascinating. And this guy and Trench are kind of the tip top, I think, in terms of leaders I want to do some deck brewing with. But let's move on because we do have more stuff to talk about with Kazuda as well, and Trench, frankly. But first, we're going to look at someone's thumb and Resistance Headquarters. Again, this is kind of like the best shot of these cards we could get for the show as we record this on 2/19 on a Wednesday here right after the stream. Resistance Headquarters, just a 30 HP green base. There you go. Theed Palace, which I like the art on this one. I like the little ship at the bottom too. Another 30 HP base. Nadiri Dockyards, looks nice. Regular base. Mos Eisley. These are all your common bases, but I really love the Mos Eisley art. That's pretty cool. And then Lake Country, you know, this is this is a little bit different. This is it's a neutral base. It doesn't have a lot going for it. In fact, it has 0 aspects, Charmer, but 34 HP. It's crazy.
I also really like this. My speed, like, sell you on this card. It's just 34, as you said, no aspects. So you have to kind of build with that in mind. I kind of want to see if I can make this work with the set 3 Palpatine leader, because you're already trying to flop between heroism and villainy. And so I think that if you just stick with cunning and then those aspects and then just take the extra 4 health, it might mitigate not having a leader you deploy enough for him to come online. So maybe. Yeah, that's what I immediately thought of, but I do want to mess around with this quite a bit as well.
I think something, you love Iden Blue. I feel like this would be great in Iden Blue, right? Because, everyone already pays 6 for Vigilance anyway. So what's the big difference, right? You get 4 more HP here. You still get to do all the same things. It doesn't effectively change your deck at all, except you pay a little bit more for Vigilance. I think something like that in those slower Healy kind of decks it could work in. Yes.
Do you know where else this is potentially a really big deal? Is Twin Suns.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because with access to more than one leader, you're going to be able to kind of shake off losing an aspect easier. And since the win conditions is most health at the end, who doesn't want to start with 4 more health than everybody else?
That is true. Although I feel like we should also mention that once set 4 comes out, the deck size for Twin Suns goes up to 80. So you do have to find more cards and less aspects. So there's still that. But I agree too that it could be decent for Twin Suns if you're looking for just a high level of survivability. But interesting base. Glad we finally have an option to at least think about, Yeah. It's about time. That's cool. Moving on to Power from Pain. 3-cost Vigilance Villainy. Giving unit +1/+0 for this phase for each damage on it. So, hey, you want to give something grit, or you want to give something with grit double damage? Or double grit effect, essentially? Here's your play. So this is like a kind of surprise extra damage in blue, which is interesting. This is kind of an aggressive blue card, I feel like.
Yeah, it is. I feel like this is at home in the new Asajj archetype after we've seen that leader spoiled. I also think that in your old Sith Inquisitor blue decks, this is also a welcome addition there as well. where you can get damage on something and have it readied and then get the additional damage. I like it. I'm wary of it in limited, and by that I mean I don't want to run into it because it will be a potentially surprise burst that I'm not doing the mental math for when I'm calculating my turns of survivability. So
definitely
keep on the lookout for that. It is just an uncommon.
Yep. Either way, it seems like a cool addition to the blue toolbox. Moving on. Here's one for you.
Oh, yeah. So blue toolbox. Let's talk about the Ghost. Last week, we got to talk about all the cool Spectre things that were being revealed. And then, of course, after we record the episode, they kind of reveal one of the linchpins of the new Ghost stuff that had come out, our new Spectre stuff that had come out. So the new version of Ghost is a 5-cost heroism vigilance space unit, has a 5/6 stat line, is, of course, trait soup, has Rebel, Vehicle, Transport, and Spectre. It says each other friendly Spectre unit gains this unit's keywords. Then it also says while this unit is upgraded, it gains Sentinel. And I think that this is a really neat design because if you are trying to give this keywords most of the time, unless you have some sort of event where it doesn't until like the end of a phase or something, most of the time you're going to do it via upgrade. But the moment you do that, it's also going to gain Sentinel, which means all of your Spectres gain Sentinel as well. Now that could be a pro, but it's also a con in that maybe you're trying to assemble like one super Spectre unit and you wanted to protect it, but now they'll always have the option to attack into it. So it is, it's a really cool feature that also has some baked in counterplay in the way they designed it. But overall, I really like this unit, and I'm happy to see it.
I think it's really neat as well, for the reasons you said, but then also just because this gives you sort of another building direction for Spectre, right? Where you're building all these, you're bringing all these Spectre units for all these different off aspects because you're running it with Hera in theory. And then now you're going to be looking to run a bunch of upgrades that give keywords too, because you can give them all to the Ghost. Obviously, you kind of run into a little bit of risk when you're piling a lot of things on this, but I think it's neat to have the option, right? At least in a casual sense of being like, all right, I'm going to play the Ghost, give it a bunch of keywords, give all my Spectres keywords, and kind of make a cool deck like that. So neat. And options.
Then Twin Suns, if you want to do Hera and your favorite, the Boba Fett 2 leader, which cares about keywords, then whoa-ho-ho.
Yeah, plus one attack for everybody. That's always a good thing. I'll keep trying to make that Boba 2 work. All right, let's take a look at Silver Angel. Vigilance only, cost 2. It's a 2/3 fringe vehicle transport. When 1 or more damage is healed from this unit, you may deal 1 damage to a space unit. So a little bit of a space combat tricks there. I guess, hey, throw it in Obi-Wan and profit, but there's a lot of other cards that can provide a little bit of healing here. And so I think this fits in if you're looking to build a list that is going to fight a lot in space, or at least you want to sideboard to be able to fight in space more effectively. And you have a little bit of healing for units in there too. But the one that jumps out, I think, for everyone right away is, can this work in Obi-Wan maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it will just work in Obi-Wan. Yeah. What jumps out to me specifically is one, I'm surprised that this is just Vigilance. Like, it's a 2/3 2-drop space unit, which is already playable, and Vigilance hasn't had many just Vigilance playable units in that space. It's always either like the heroism or the villainy side. That's why we're all playing Inferno 4. The thing that jumps out to me, though, is if we have a meta where the new indirect damage stuff becomes very prevalent, the stocks on this go way up if you're playing this with like the smuggle card that heals and gives an XP token, because you can indirect damage, just put it all on here and then respond with your own action of, by the way, I just healed it all, buffed this up, and I did damage back to you. That is a very reasonable thing. And when you can splash it because it's just Vigilance, I could see this either be not played at all, but I could see metas where this is also very prevalent.
Yeah, again, I feel like it does fill that gap like you're talking about, but I think it's also a decent sideboard thing too. If you run to a space-heavy deck, which now we are going to see a big range. You're going to see decks that don't run really much space, and we're going to see decks that are like only space. So having the ability to specifically combat things in space, I think is going to be more important as we go on in the game. So I like it. I like the addition. Moving on.
Hey, speaking of fun stuff that helps space, Trace Martez. This is a 3-cost, again, just Vigilance unit. It is a pilot, so when you pay the 3 cost, it can deploy to the ground as a 2/5, or piloting for just 1 resource, again, still vigilance. It can give something +1/+2, but also attached unit gains on attack. You may heal 2 total damage from any number of units. So it goes very, very well with the card we were just looking at, because you can slap this on it, heal, and again, it's 2 total damage. You can even just heal 1 off of it, still get the ping, and then heal something else, and kind of reap that reward over and over again. Just an overall really helpful unit, and again, an uncommon.
Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of like Rose support, right? Where we looked at Rose decks that she heals things and does stuff. So if you want to have a deck that runs a lot of vehicles and that just kind of tries to keep those vehicles alive, Tres Martes could fit into that pretty well. All right, out the airlock. 5, give a unit -5/-5 for this phase. So it's kind of like a less specific hello there, to a certain extent, where it gives -5/-5 instead of -4/-4. But at the same time, it's like, this is a good way to get around cards that don't allow units to be defeated, since you can give a big -/ instead. So I think it's a nice toolbox card, right? Where depending on the meta, you might pick this instead of Vanquish, right? So I like that we have the option,
Goes through shields very well as well.
Yeah.
A lot of uses. I just wanted to say what I am going to officially call this going forward, because you made the connection with the hello there. I will only now refer to this as goodbye there.
Yeah.
Because it's literally there. One is hello there, and this is I'm shipping you out the airlock. Goodbye, right?
I don't know what this is necessarily a reference to. I think this is like what the evil protocol droid or something like that, right? Because it's a C-3PO looking thing with red eyes. So it's got to be a bad protocol droid. So I'm guessing somewhere in the shows or comics, one got jettisoned from
or the red eyes are because it's C-3PO being angry. They got so annoyed with him that they just let him sit outside for a bit.
He's got like markings too, though. Look, he's got like stripes on
it's
stuff,
totally.
So it's got to be something like that. All right, well, I got to catch up on this stuff apparently. Moving on to another legendary for you. You're getting all the legendaries today.
I'm getting all of them, and I love this one too. Nebula Ignition. So this is a 9-cost event in just Vigilance. It is a disaster, and it says defeat each unit that isn't upgraded. So you get a super laser blast that you can essentially play in heroism, but you can also make your units survive it by giving them upgrades. Now, obviously, your opponent gets the same benefit. So if they are running pilots, that's an issue. But one of the things that you're going to have to remember is shield tokens, experience tokens, all of those things do technically count as upgrades as well. So while on paper this, looks insane, or at least I felt like it, the more I thought through the process, I think that this is still very strong, but it will not have the immediate impact I thought it might on first glance.
Well, it's definitely no super laser blast. That's for sure. But being able to pay 1 more for something that, kills everything except for even one of your units is still going to be good. So I think it is nice to see some of those big late game bombs in blue be given to heroism, even though this isn't a heroism card. It's at least something that can be played easily in heroism. That said, if you're playing a late game blue deck in heroism that goes late enough to play something like this, why not just pay 1 more for super laser blast? So I don't know how much use this is going to see, but again, I think if you can craft situations where you destroy everything except for like 1 big unit that you've been upgrading, I think then it is probably going to be good. But it's really going to have to depend on how people build their decks, if a deck finds a home for it, and then if the meta kind of supports something like this working, right? If you can craft a game state reliably to get value out of this, and I'm not so sure if that's going to happen or not. But again, I think it's a neat card to think about when you're deck building. All right. Sick. I get this legendary, and I'm very happy about this. Piet support. Yay. It's the Executor. The Executor, rather, not the Executor. It's not like a middle manager star destroyer. This is the biggest of the biggest. This is the Executor. 11 cost, command, villainy. 12/12 is the stat line, which is, if you're familiar with the old Decipher Star Wars collectible card game, it seems like a bit of a callback to that card because that was a 12/12 as well. So I think there's a little nod to Star Wars card game history, which I love as a player of that game. Imperial vehicle, capital ship, has overwhelm, and when played / on attack / when defeated, create 3 TIE fighter tokens. So tons of TIE Swarm. I'm thinking about playing this with the Piet leader and the Piet unit. So when you have the Piet unit out there, this gets ambush. So you play it, you ambush into something, you overwhelm for a ton, and you make 6 TIE tokens. Like, this could be just a fantastic finisher for a Piet deck. So I love it. I love seeing the Executor in any form, and so it's I like the way that we get it in Star Wars Unlimited.
I agree with everything you said. I don't have a lot to add. I wanted to just point out one last thing, which is up until this point, one of the like kind of late game bombs that has dictated the meta has been Avenger for quite a bit of time. I would dare say, like, right now the meta for late game is just defined by Crate Dragon and Avenger. Now, when you look at Avenger specifically, what I like about the Might of the Empire, as it's called, is that it protects itself from Avenger counterplay, right? Because with Avenger, you wait for them to play their bomb, you play Avenger, and whatever the big thing they played is hopefully just gone if you've kept the board relatively clean.
Yeah.
This comes in with 3 TIE fighters that you can readily, sacrifice, but also regularly, because you're going to get more every on attack.
No, you're totally right. It's a great point.
So it just naturally protects from Power of the Dark Side, Avenger, a lot of those things. And so that was the only other bit that when I saw this, I was like, oh, that's actually really neat.
Yeah, I feel like a double green gets a lot more plausible in something like OG Set 1 Palpatine with something like this. If you don't want to run all the blue stuff, you can try this. But again, in Piet, you can, if he's flipped, you can play it for 9. So it comes out, with the same cost as the Avenger, and you get all this great bonus from it. So I'm really excited to see any sort of Piet support. I think it's going to be fun I would love a deck that I just got to reliably play big Star Destroyers and do well with, so that's going to be fun. Moving on to Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, Luke Skywalker is a pilot. So this is Heroism in Command. You can pay 2 to deploy him on the ground as just a vanilla 3/2. But you can also pay 3, and again, Heroism in Command for the aspects, to deploy Luke as a pilot. When doing so, +3/+2. If this upgrade would be defeated, you may instead move him to the ground arena as a unit and exhaust him. So that feels pretty strong to me. My first immediate comparison was Cobb Vanth. Cobb Vanth is something where you pay 3, you get a 3/2 in stats, and then you get like a 2-drop. If you play him as a pilot, and then you get that 3/2 in stats, and then when he would be defeated as an upgrade, you essentially get a 2-drop, right? A 3/2. It's just a vanilla 3/2, but you get that out of it. That's where I was kind of comparing him. Obviously not the same. Playing him as a pilot means you get that +3/+2 right away. His keywords are Force, Rebel, and Pilot, which are all very relevant as well. So not 1-to-1, but that was my immediate, this is kind of like a Heroism Cobb Vanth for pilots.
Yeah, I love the combos you can maybe do with this, right? Where you have Luke Skywalker piloting something and you heroic sacrifice it, right? So +2 damage there. So you've got a minimum of 5 from Luke plus the card plus whatever, plus add to that whatever ship he's piloting. So a big amount of damage to their base. You draw a card because you played heroic sacrifice. It dies, and then Luke bounces to the ground for you to theoretically either draw an attack from your opponent or a card or to use next turn. So I think there's going to be a lot of fun, combo shenanigans you can do with this. And when I think about this, I think about Poe, just like green-red fighter aggression, either with Poe or Wedge, or maybe even the Luke leader, all seems like it's going to be a strong deck, and I think this is a great tool for that too. So I'm excited. This is another one that has me really excited for the low-to-ground heroic aggressive ship deck. Should be neat. All right, speaking of low-to-the-ground ships, well, in terms of cost, in terms of reality, it's in space still. But 2 for a 2/1. It is the Scouting Headhunter. It is in command only, fringe vehicle fighter, and it's got Sentinel. You wanted to just plunk down an early Sentinel? There you go. I think a lot of decks are going to be happy to see that.
Yeah, it's really straightforward, and it's a great common. So when you are playing command in limited, I think that you can expect to see a bunch of these. The 1 health, I think, is going to be a bit of an issue, just because, again, so much indirect damage floating around. But other than that, does everything you want.
I think it's, like you said, I think it's going to be a fine card in limited. Maybe some decks are going to want it in Premier, but overall, it's just kind of another neat thing to have, right? Moving on. Neat
All right,
event.
moving on to another card that I just adore. So this is Salvage. This is a 0-cost event in Command, has the supply tag on it, and it says play a vehicle unit from your discard pile paying its cost, then deal 1 damage to it. So it costs 0 by itself. So you're essentially just playing any vehicle from your discard pile at the cost of dealing 1 damage to said unit. I think that is very, very good when you consider all of the different ways that things could end up in your discard pile. We've been looking for more kind of reanimator support anyway. But what I also really like about this is that it gives you a second potential pairing when you consider Asajj Ventress or some of those grit-based decks, because now you can replay those same units while also powering them up along the way. So really excited to kind of tinker with this.
I mean, I just casted a Wichita Planetary Qualifier match for the channel that had Krennic in it. So if you want to run Space Krennic with vehicles, this fits right into that, right? Because the 1 damage on that vehicle is going to translate to +1 attack with the Krennic leader ability. So I'm with you. I think this has a lot of different applications that go very well with different cards that take advantage of a damage being on your unit. Very cool. All right, Air Superiority. Cost 2, it's another command event. If you control more space units than an opponent, deal 4 damage to a ground unit that opponent controls. As someone who is very much looking forward to playing the Green Vader tie spam deck that it looks like we're going to be able to build in set 4, I think this card fits in perfectly with that, right? Because if you're going all in on space, having a card or two that can do significant damage to the ground for cheap is great. So 2 for 4 damage, I think is awesome. I think in the deck I'm thinking about building, I will be reliably able to place a whole bunch of units in space and have that advantage, you know? Obviously, if you don't, it's kind of a dead card. You're going to be resourcing it. But I think this one could really work based on the amount of things we've seen that can create tie tokens specifically.
I think this card is kind of bonkers because
it's great.
When you think about how easy certain archetypes will be able to take advantage of it, because not every space deck will still be able to spam units. I think you rightfully pointed out Vader, whereas a lot of them might be play, 2 or 3 space units, and then you try to put upgrades on them. The Vader is just like units. But what I really like about this is it is a lot of damage for the cost, as you pointed out, but also it's in command, which is an aspect that normally it does have some direct damage removal, but it's usually in the form of either ambush or where you have a unit deal damage equal to its power. Whereas this, you're going to have likely a bunch of small TIE fighters in which dealing damage equal to the power would have been detrimental. So instead, you're just straight up scaled. The last bit that I just wanted to point out is that it is not a non-leader damage, right? So you can absolutely ping some of those leader units on the ground. This is 1 damage away from just killing a Sabine outright, which is kind of bonkers.
Yeah, it's a lot of damage for the cost, like you said, and just more support for the deck I want to play. So I'm excited for that. I'm going to be villainy green in space, I guess, between Piet and Vader, but this is exactly what the doctor ordered for that. All right, this is a really cool one.
Oh yeah, this card is also kind of silly. So Relentless Fire Spray. This is a 6-cost space unit that is double aggression, but for that 6-cost double aggression, what you get is a 4/6 stat line that is an underworld vehicle transport. On attack, ready this unit. Use this ability only once each round. But I think that might just be enough, because when you factor in potentially putting a pilot on this thing, if you can get double the benefit from one of your big pilots or a leader or whatever, like, even though this is a fire spray, what I thought of is like, man, you take that Luke leader pilot, you jam him on this where you can't destroy the upgrade and he's counted as a leader, and then you get to swing twice with that. That is suddenly a lot of damage.
Yep, I mean, seems really good in something like the new Boba Fett leader we've seen in Double Red. I'm thinking like Kylo would like this as just kind of a closer card, even though you're not necessarily playing a bunch of stuff in space with Kylo. This could come in, like I said, and do maybe 8 damage in a turn, after you play it. The turn after you play it, obviously. But I think it's very exciting. I think it's a great tool for Red in terms of if we want Double Red to have closers, this is a closer, right?
Yeah.
So that's exciting. Moving on to someone else who looks exciting. The Determined Recruit. He looks kind of sad, though, compare him to the to our, I would say almost our mascot,
the sympathizer,
the ardent sympathizer, who is a very, very happy looking Sullustan. This guy looks kind of sad. He looks determined, but kind of bittersweet, a little bit nostalgic maybe for the good old days where he was back in college with Nien Nub, and it was just parties all the time and no worries. No one thought about the Empire, but now here he is on the front lines of the rebellion. But let's talk about the card itself a little bit before I go too far into my fan fiction. It's an aggression card, 3/1 on the ground for 2. Otherwise, piloting, you can pay 2 and get 3/1 in the air. And he's a resistance pilot. So notably not rebel. So you don't get that rebel trait. But if you're building something in the resistance theme, he's going to be your guy.
Yeah. What I like about this is that it's very straightforward, which is exactly what you want out of a common that is also not heroism or villainy. So while this won't be your first pick in a draft or your standout card in a sealed pool, you're still likely going to find a use for this somewhere when you're building for limited. But I also just wanted to say I agree with you. And I think the reason that he is a little less happy is because he's a pilot. He wants to be on the ground where he can be like, there I go murdering again. Yep. And he's like, oh, I'm the DD of this trip, right? Like I have to be stuck driving.
Ardent sympathizer and him go way back, Yeah. Yeah. Hopefully they'll meet up again someday. Don't worry. I believe. Tell us about Cam Syndulla.
Cam Syndulla is a 4-cost ground unit that is just aggression. And for that, you still get a 5/4 stat line and Rebel and Twi'lek traits, which is kind of fantastic. When played, and if an opponent controls more resources than you, you may put the top card of your deck into play as a resource, which is something that I think is really interesting because up until you get to the when played, this feels like it's going to be a very aggressive card. It's in aggression. It's, aggressively statted 4 for a 5/4. It's got relevant traits, and then it has the when played if an opponent controls more resources than you, which historically means, well, they're ahead, so I'm probably on aggression. But then you ramp, right? Yeah. So that's the only part where I'm like, I don't know what deck I want this for.
I mean,
that part is interesting. It's not bad. Like I think that there's a lot of places that you could play it, but when I think about like how am I going to best use this when played, I don't know. It feels just like a nice to have.
So here's where I see it, and I do feel like it is a sideboard card. I will clarify, right off the bat. But there's so many decks that ramp pretty efficiently in this game that they do it very consistently. So having this in the sideboard, being able to bring it in, and you're playing a little bit more of a loaded ground deck, they resupply. Next turn, you play this, catch up in resources, and suddenly you're also at 5 resources, so you can flip your leader. Maybe you're running this with ECL, so you ECL this guy in, get your resource, then flip your leader. Like you could, I could see some kind of crazy scenarios and crazy swings happening with this card. But again, as a sideboard card, right? You bring it in a matchup where they're always ramping, and then you catch them off guard like that, to put more aggression on and just kind of keep up resource-wise. So I think it's a neat tool in the toolbox for red. I think it's, like I said, great sideboard card. I don't think we'd ever really see it in a main deck situation. I don't think ramping is prevalent enough to warrant it as a main deck card. But I do think I do think sideboard is fine. I mean, you also look at things like Lando, some of the Lando stuff that destroys your own resources. This is something where you can do that and then play him to get back that resource, essentially.
No,
right?
Sorry. There's that. But what you just did is, you actually clicked. No, this card is actually really good. My apologies for everyone. I'm sorry.
It unlocks
Sometimes
that
I say
too.
things out loud and I'm just bad and dumb and wrong.
No, I don't think you were totally wrong with it. But
where this card is great is into Han.
Of course, yeah, it's a sideboard. You play it into Han, right? Because then he has to destroy his resource, and he still is 1 resource up each turn, but it costs him a card to do it, So it does help you out against Han, but yeah, I think there's a lot of applications here. And again, I will say, if you want to go back and play like Lando aggression, like what is it? Set 2 Lando? I'm trying to remember which Lando.
Set 2 Lando.
Yeah, set 2 Lando. Yep, Smuggle Lando. Play a card with Smuggle. It costs 2 less than defeat a resource you own and control. This helps you catch back up and kind of mitigate that penalty. So I wonder if there's some interesting like Lando value decks that exist because of this. So I'm very curious to see how this card's going to play out. Super interesting.
Could also use it to catch back up after someone DJs your resource away.
Yeah, that too.
With the tech combo.
Sideboard. Yeah, I think a lot of red decks are going to be putting it in the sideboard. I know I will. All right, War Juggernaut.
War Juggernaut is a 6-cost ground unit. Has a 3/7 stat line. But, and I think this is the most important bit, it is a Republic vehicle tank. So that's right, this can have pilots attached to it, which will be a big deal in this set.
Yep.
This unit gets +1/+0 for each damaged unit. So friendly, enemy, doesn't matter. If the unit has damage, it gets +1/+0. When played, deal 1 damage to each of any number of units. So it also turns itself on very nicely. Just as an aside, also a great potential target for salvage as well, because you're already going to be planning on dealing damage to yourself to get the bonus anyway. So why not replay it a few more times from the discard pile?
Yeah, I look at this too, and I'm like, I could use it when played, but I could also be playing it in like Grand Inquisitor as well, because it's got 3 power, and I can I can ready it and then buff it after I ready it. So I think it's got some very, like I said, this set is just filled with stuff that is support for older sets too, and I think this is another one where I'm like, all right, maybe Grand Inquisitor's getting a little bit more fuel here too. But either way, neat card.
A great shield eater. So against a pesky Kira, for example, you could peel off those shields.
Yeah, it's got and also just like pinging a bunch of battle droids too. I mean, in the picture, it's literally running over battle droids. So this can also be used, sadly, to
TIE fighters.
My Wat Tambor deck. Yeah, it's bad for TIE fighters. So maybe this is just going to be another decent sideboard card too.
Yeah. Red sideboard stonks going up.
Yeah, sets up Tarkin Town as well. So pretty good uncommon, gotta say. Seems that way. 6 costs is a lot, but I think you can do a lot with it. So let's moving on to the Twin Laser Turret. Cost 2, it's aggression only. It is a modification weapon, +2/+2, attached to a vehicle unit. Attached unit gains on attack, deal 1 damage to each of up to 2 units in this arena. So you get a nice on attack out of it. +2 for 2/2. Cool, you know?
Yep.
I think this is another thing where if you want to handle TIE Fighter tokens, great. You've done that, you know? Otherwise, turning on other abilities, because it doesn't say only enemy unit. You can shoot your own units with the 2, theoretically. So I think there's some fun combo potential with this too.
Yeah, I was going to point that out. What I was going to say is that even if you only are dealing 1 damage to an enemy unit, where this also is perfect is on like a grit unit, for example. So you might want to consider this if you're playing Asajj in sealed or something.
Yeah. Yep. I like the versatility. That's another theme that I feel like with this set is that a lot of cards just have a large amount of versatility in terms of how they can be used. Very cool. System Shock.
Next up we have System Shock. So this is a 1-cost event in aggression that is a tactic. Defeat a non-leader upgrade attached to a unit. If you do, deal 1 damage to that unit. Pretty straightforward. It's obviously your kind of upgrade, pun intended, on Confiscate, because it's not neutral, it's an aggression. So the benefit is that you also get to deal 1 damage to said unit. If it's a unit that had 1 health before the upgrade, then you're likely killing it. So again, going to be very good against TIE fighters, for example. One drawback when compared to Confiscate, though, is it does say non-leader upgrade.
Yeah, I think the other thing to think about when you compare it to Confiscate, because it's not just like a straight upgrade to Confiscate, because a lot of people will use Confiscate to take things like Perilous Position or bounties off their own units. And so you don't necessarily want to be dealing damage to your units while you do this. So in red, I think you're still going to need to make a choice between this and Confiscate. But again, depending on the meta, I think this could work really well as a Confiscate alternative for sure. But I wouldn't look at this. I wouldn't be the person to look at this and be like, oh, it's just an upgrade on Confiscate for red. It's like, it's not that. It's conditionally good, you know, which is how a card should be. We shouldn't be seeing straight up upgrades. All right. Contracted Jumpmaster. 3 for a 2/4 in space. This one is Cunning Villainy. Underworld vehicle transport with Sentinel. So I think this is a nice upgrade when you compare it to like the Black Sun Starfighter. That's a 3 for a 3/3 Sentinel. This also has Underworld vehicle transport, so you can use it just as well in things like Cad Bane. I really like this card. I think this would just is just a straight up upgrade to Black Sun Starfighter and Cad Bane, and you know, I think you could fit it into a lot of space decks that just want a little bit of a roadblock to throw in front of your opponent.
Yeah, I think that you want the 4 health a lot more than you want the 3 power. So I just wholeheartedly agree. And it's just one more card that Set 1 Vader can pull out very economically.
Very, very true. Also works in Cad Bane if you run a blue. Yeah.
Yep.
Moving on. Invincible.
Oh, so I guess I get all the legendaries.
I guess so.
Invincible.
3 out of 4 so far.
6 cost space unit, cunning and villainy. Has a 6/6 stat line. It is a separatist vehicle capital ship. If you control a separatist card, this unit costs 1 less to play. So it's a 5 cost 6/6 at that point. And when you deploy a leader, you may return a non-leader unit that costs 3 or less to its owner's hand. What stands out to me the most is that, like, normally that when you deploy a leader would be once per game, but you get the really big benefit when you combine this with Admiral Trench, because that is a leader that you can deploy, you know, multiple times throughout the course of a game.
Yep, exactly. I feel like there's a pun there where it says naval adversary, and it's a battle droid kind of thing, and they don't have belly buttons because they're constructed, but they fight the flesh bags, you know, that do. Many of whom have those, so quite literally a naval adversary. But moving on anyway, I agree. It's trench support. It's neat to see the potential for playing it in other decks, like maybe Grievous, stuff that likes separatist things. You know, you can get it out very cheaply in certain situations. So I think this is going to be one of those legendaries that we do see some use in Premier decks. I think it's got the tools for it.
I mean, if you want to do really weird stuff with Piet and also part separatist, it is also a capital ship. So there is a world where you could be paying like 4 for this to get a 6/6.
Yeah, it's totally possible. I mean, Piet gives you access to all sorts of crazy tricks with capital ships. So every capital ship that comes out, you got to think about how it works in Piet. That's for sure. I mean, at the very least, he helps you mitigate aspect penalties. So you can maybe play things off aspect a little bit easier in Piet too. Moving on to In Debt to the Crimson Dawn. Interesting. 2 for a 0/0 upgrade. It's a condition. It's cunning and villainy. It says when attached unit readies, exhaust it unless its controller pays 2. So I like it. It's another negative upgrade to put on your opponent's cards in line with like perilous position, bounties, things like that. But this one's going to be really annoying because you're going to get your opponent 2 resources down potentially to ready their unit. And you notice it doesn't say non-leader either. So you can put this on leaders. So I think this is a pretty powerful upgrade for cunning to have access to.
What I also really like about it is it just when attached unit readies, it's not even during the regroup. So if they were to play anything where they would be allowed to ready a unit, right? Or use like Inquisitor's ability or whatever the case may be, you still have to pay the tax. The Crimson Dawn always collects its debts. Wait, no, that's a different show. Anyway, all this did though, when I saw this, is I was like, wow, I just love Kazuda even more because I'll just turn this off.
There you go. Yeah. Although, would it turn off this, though? Because I think Kazuda only turns off abilities on the card itself, on the unit. And this is a upgrade ability.
Oh, yeah, because this very specifically, and you and I had a kind of conversation about this, this very specifically does not say attached unit gains.
Yes.
This is on the upgrade. So no, Kazuda doesn't even stop this.
I think they were one step ahead of you. There you go.
Yeah, the Crimson Dawn always collects its debts.
That's how it goes. No question there. We got the fireball at least. Speaking
All right, we got the Fireball. Yeah, speaking of Kazuda, so we have a 2-cost space unit named the Fireball that is in Cunning and Heroism, just like Kazuda. This has a 3/3 stat line. It is a resistance vehicle fighter, has ambush, but when the regroup phase starts, deal 1 damage to this unit. But again, if you're playing this with Kazuda, you could turn that part off. So you could get the ambush and then turn it off so you're not continuing to take the damage. I just really like this because worst case scenario, what you're looking at is something where it's like you pay 2 to, you know, deal 3 to something in space, which is pretty good in Cunning historically. Where most of your ambush stuff has always been on the ground for Cunning. So I like it for that alone.
Yeah, I like it for all the same reasons. And doing a damage to it, like I said, might be a boon these days. You kind of want damage on things now, so it's pretty cool. All right, Jam Communications, which almost sounds like the name of a Star Wars character. I can see a Star Wars character named Jam Communications, but it's actually an event in this case. It's cost 1, cunning, heroism, look at opponent's hand, and discard an event from it. So sideboard, if you're playing against something like a Bosk or like the old Blue Vader type of thing, if you're running into a deck that runs a ton of events, this is just a really efficient little removal card. Again, this looks like a sideboard card to me.
Yeah, it's a sideboard card, but where you want this is such a powerhouse.
Yeah.
Like in those matchups where this is good, it's really good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
All right.
Is this Sidon or Sidon? I thought it was Sidon.
Sidon? Sidon
Yeah,
Ithano?
Sidon Ithano is the way that I always said it, but
either way, you don't want him around.
2 cost pilot unit, but it's not like your grandpappy's kind of pilot. So
not like your other pilots.
It's a 2 cost cunning unit that has a 2/2 stat line, does not have a piloting cost, but says when played as a unit, you may attach this unit as an upgrade to an enemy vehicle without a pilot on it. And then when that happens, you get to give that thing -2/-2. Mm-hmm. So it's either 2 for a 2/2 or 2 to make something get -2/-2. But it also takes the place of a pilot. So the real story here, what matters the most is that when you do this, you prevent your opponent from also playing their pilot on this unless it's a unit where they can naturally play more than one, which can be really powerful. We've been talking a lot about sideboard options this podcast. I think this one is perfect for cunning, where if you're playing against a piloting heavy deck, being able to be like, haha, you can't put Poe on that thing you just played is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and I think as we go on, a lot of the spoilers are becoming more like sideboard oriented because, by design, right, where they showed us a lot of the core stuff for the set, and now we're seeing a lot of the tools we're going to get to sort of like work around it. I like it.
Interesting. So really interesting interplay with this that I hadn't considered because, again, a lot of these were revealed when I didn't have time to process them. Mm-hmm. You can play salvage. Well, no, you can't play salvage. You could play anything that resurrects a unit, though, and still do this because it's when played as a unit that you do the thing. It's not the piloting cost. So salvage specifically says vehicle units, but anything else where it's letting you like resurrect a unit, you could still like resurrect removal essentially.
Yeah, you mentioned what's his face earlier. Why am I blanking on the name right now? The green character that brings a unit back. The Marshal.
Well, so he searches for it, but that's Cobb Vanth.
Oh,
which
Cobb
is
Vanth,
also another great use.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Cobb Vanth fuel. We got the Contracted Hunter as well. 3 for a 4/4 with ambush. When the regroup phase starts, defeat this unit. So, hey, another Kazuda support card, right? If you have Kazuda, you play this guy, you ambush, and then you use Kazuda's ability to remove the when regroup phase starts, defeat this unit. It removes the ambush as well, but by that time you've already ambushed, so who cares, right? So I think it's a fun way to play a 4/4 for 3 and get some upside out of it.
It's also an Underworld Bounty Hunter, which, again, both very relevant traits.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's right. Honestly, it's 5 damage and ambush for 3 with like Boba 2 as well, because this is cunning only. I think this card is going to see some interesting uses. I think it's good.
We have Skyway Cloud Car, which is a 3-cost just cunning ground unit. It is a 3/3 fringe vehicle fighter. So this is, again, one of those ground units that you can put a pilot on. When defeated, you may return a non-leader unit with 2 or less power to its owner's hand.
Interesting. So it can bounce a token, potentially. Bounce a TIE token, bounce an X-Wing token, bounce a smaller unit. So you've got that sort of like disincentive to attack into it, which is kind of nice. But aside from that, it's a 3 for 3/3. I think it might be powerful in limited, but I don't know if it's going to see a ton of play in constructed decks per se, aside from very specific circumstances. Well, let's move on to another exciting one, the Razor Crest. Beautiful piece of art for this one, by the way. I love the Razor Crest.
Yeah.
Wish they would have never destroyed it in the show. They got it. They got to give him a new one. But it's 4 for a 3/5 Mandalorian vehicle transport. It is cunning only. When a pilot attaches to this unit, you may return a non-leader unit that costs 2 or less, or an exhausted non-leader unit that costs 4 or less to its owner's hand. So this plays really nicely with the Mandalorian leader from set 2 in that it gets a bigger benefit from exhausted units. So, when because a pilot is an upgrade, so you play this, you play pilot on it, you get the upgrade playing effect from your Mandalorian leader, and you get to return a 4 or less cost to its owner's hand. So I think this is pretty good in Mandalorian specifically. Outside of that, I think it's probably still decent, but I'm not sure if it would always claim a spot, I think it's worth trying out in some decks.
Yeah, and when you remember the Mandalorian unit that was revealed for the set, what it does, when it's played as an upgrade, you exhaust an enemy unit in the arena, right? So when a pilot attaches, then you also get to do the other part of this. And so what you're also kind of doing is setting up that neat combo where you play the Razor Crest maybe first, and then when something gets in your way, then you deploy Mandalorian, it exhausts it, and then potentially also bounces it outright, which is a very economical play and would turn this into a 6/6 at that point.
Also, I gotta say, pilots in Gar Saxon seem pretty good. So if your Gar Saxon Cunning is already a deck, I think you can go in kind of a space direction with this, and that can be part of it. Something to think about. Moving on.
Yeah, we have Corporate Light Cruiser, 6-cost space unit in just Cunning. It is a 4/6 fringe vehicle capital ship. Users rejoice. This has ambush and raid 1, so very straightforward. But honestly, I think that this is a wonderful common for the set because it gives you like one of those nice mid-range units where you're always going to have some value when you're playing this in the limited environment. And again, just Cunning means that when you want to splash for this, you can.
Yeah, we'll be liking it in limited and maybe Premier. We'll see. Punch It. Cost 1. Cunning only. Attack with a vehicle unit. Gets +2/+0 for this attack. Basic, simple, great little aggressive card. I like it a lot. I think if you're playing an aggressive space deck, you're going to be putting it in there. It's like a mini surprise strike for vehicles.
Yeah.
There you go. It's pretty good.
Hard to go wrong with that.
Yep. And finally, a card that, again, we could do a whole episode on. Tell us about the Swarming Vulture Droid.
This is a 2-cost neutral space unit, has a 2/2 stat line. It is a Separatist droid vehicle fighter. A deck can have up to 15 copies of this card. This unit gets +1/+0 for each other friendly swarming vulture droid. I assume that it works this way, but what I immediately thought of when I saw this was like, oh, wow. If I'm playing the new neutral base in Twin Suns, I could just make up what I'm losing in aspects by just playing 15 copies of this, because I believe this would allow you to break the rule of 1 even in Twin Suns.
I believe it would as well. I mean, the card text trumps rules text, right? So I think you would definitely be able to do that. I think it's an interesting, again, build around card that you can kind of think of. It's a common, so we'll have a lot of those. I think it's actually a pretty decent limited card. If you end up finding like 3 or 4 of these, might as well throw it in there, right? They're just going to buff each other. They're going to be harder to remove in limited. I want to see a deck use this effectively. I don't know if we're going to see a deck be very strong using this effectively, but I have to do some more brewing around this. It's one of those cards where it's like you got to find a way to make it work, right? So might be experimenting with it a bit. And that is going to do it, for our spoilers here. So we did have one mailbag question. I think because we're running short on time here for the episode, we're going to leave that until next week. Yeah. So again, if you want to put some questions into the mailbag, go to our Discord. We've got a channel exactly for that. And next week we'll get to some of those.
Yeah, I was just trying to scroll back through, and I just realized that technically we know that there were already some additional cards spoiled that didn't even make it into our prep.
That's how it always goes.
That there were just so many today. So we did as much as we can. We'll make sure to get the rest next week. We'll figure out whatever it is that we were missing. But there was a lot today, gang.
Yeah. I see a couple of them. But all right, cool. Yeah. Well, that was everything we had for this episode anyway. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll get to those other ones next week. Again, join our Discord. Go to icecaveradio.com. Check out the merch. Check out the Patreon. And that is it for this week. One last thing from Charmer.
May the Force be with you.